Byjus exam prep. Today we will discuss center-state relations. Then we will look at local government, panchayati raj institutions and municipalities. Then there are two big topics which are left. One, judiciary, the other, elections. And then Indian polity syllabus would be complete. When we look at center-state relations, we will first look at how this topic can be relevant for your prelims examination. So we will look at lots and lots of facts which you will have to remember and memorize. And then we will look at the center-state relations topic from the mains perspective. What topics, what sort of questions, what are the concepts that you have to keep in mind for the mains examination? And we will be focusing on center-state legislative and administrative relations. So far as financial relations are concerned, that is something that we will discuss in economics. Some of you may have already covered it. Some of you would cover in the upcoming economics batch. Why? Because there is an overlap. GST, Finance Commission, taxes, surcharge, cess, how the proceeds are distributed, what is the recommendation of the Finance Commission. So there is an overlap, but to avoid overlap and to ultimately save your time, we will discuss this only at one place, which is in the economics classes. So today we will focus on the legislative relations and the administrative relations between the center and the state. Because we are a federal polity. And one aspect of federal polity is distribution of powers. Or should we say the distribution of legislative subjects. That is something which is covered from Articles 245 to 255 of the Constitution under Part 11, which deals with legislative relations. You don't have to remember the article number, just understand the concept. What is the concept? Number one, simple to understand, the laws which are passed by the Parliament are applicable throughout the territory of India. That means the parliamentary law, its jurisdiction is throughout the length and breadth of the territory of India. But so far as the law passed by the state legislature is concerned, its validity, its jurisdiction is only with respect to that state. Which means Karnataka legislature will pass a law and this law will be applicable only within Karnataka. Same goes with UP, same goes with Madhya Pradesh. This is something that you would also know. But then Parliament alone can make extraterritorial legislation. What is this extraterritorial legislation? That means the laws which are passed by Parliament, not the state legislature, Parliament, are applicable to Indian citizens and their property anywhere in the world. How? Listen to me carefully. There is one menace known as black money. Although personally I have a problem in calling it black money, this is a racist term, we can call it unaccounted money. What is this unaccounted money or black money? I have a property, let's say an apartment, and I'm selling this apartment for 2 crore rupees. You are a buyer. I'm telling you, you give me 1 crore rupee in check or you transfer 1 crore rupees online, but the remaining 1 crore you have to pay me in the form of cash. And then this cash I will store somewhere. Either I will buy gold or I will invest in real estate again, whatever. This 1 crore money is basically unaccounted money because I'm not paying taxes on this 1 crore rupees. I'm paying only taxes on 1 crore rupees, which you have paid me online or in the form of a check, because I give a sense to the government authorities that I've sold this property only for 1 crore rupees. The remaining 1 crore is unaccounted money or what is known as the black money. And there are wealthy individuals in India who store this unaccounted money in foreign bank accounts. For example, in Switzerland and Mauritius and in various tax havens. What are these tax havens? Where the taxes are mostly 0%, which means you end up saving a lot of money. How can we bring this money back? For that, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy has a very good solution. And what is the solution? He says the accounts, bank accounts of Indians outside India, nationalize all those bank accounts. Just like we nationalized the banks in the 1960s, the private banks were converted into government banks, nationalized. Similarly, his argument is that all the bank accounts of Indians in these tax havens should be nationalized. Once they are nationalized, that means now these bank accounts are that of the government, and now the government can withdraw money. If such an action is to be taken, who has the power to make a law? Only the parliament. Because only parliamentary law will have extraterritorial jurisdiction. Otherwise, the law passed by the state legislature, its territory is only that state. Beyond that state, this law cannot enter, cannot be applicable. But the laws passed by the parliament will have extraterritorial jurisdiction as well. Similarly, when we look at three lists, union list, state list, concurrent list, all these subjects which are mentioned in the union list, Parliament alone has the power to make a law. For example, defense, external affairs, communication, banking, insurance, extradition. On all these matters, Parliament alone has the power to make a law, which means the Constitution has distributed legislative subjects to Parliament, to state legislatures. But there are items mentioned in the state list where state legislature, that too in normal circumstances, has the power to make law. For example, on law and order, on police, on gambling, who has the agriculture, who has the power to make laws? State legislature. But when? In normal circumstances. What are these abnormal circumstances? We have discussed president's rule. The government is dismissed. Legislature is suspended. Now, when there is a president's rule for a state, who can make law for that state? Parliament. Similarly, we have discussed national emergency, where Parliament assumes concurrent power of legislation. That means even if there are subjects mentioned in the state list, but during national emergency, Parliament also can make laws on any of these items mentioned in the state list. But then there is something known as the concurrent list. Criminal law and procedure, marriage, divorce, electricity, education. Who has the power to make laws? Both Parliament as well as state legislature. But sir, how? What if the law passed by the Parliament is in conflict with state legislature? Or what if the law passed by the state legislature is in conflict with the law passed by the Parliament? If on education, if on criminal procedure, let's say the criminal procedure is, if you have committed any crime, for that the parliamentary law says punishment is 10 years. But law passed by the state says the punishment is 7 years. What law will prevail? Can I say that in all circumstances, in case there is a clash between the parliamentary law and the state law, on an item mentioned in the concurrent list, parliamentary law always prevails? No, then the statement would be wrong. Why? For example, Parliament has already enacted a law on education, Right to Education Act. Now, can the state legislature also enact a law on education? Yes. But then this law which is passed by the state legislature, this bill which has been passed by the state legislature, will be reserved for the consideration of President. And if President has approved this bill, then the state law will prevail over the law passed by the Parliament, which means distribution of legislative subjects. There are some items which are given to the Parliament, and most of the legislative subjects are with the Parliament. 97 items are with the Parliament. There are some items which are given to the states. 61 such items are given to the states. And there are some items which are given to both center as well as states. That means both Parliament as well as the state legislature, they have the concurrent power to make law on these items. For example, when the 3 farm laws were passed by the Parliament, the Legislative Assembly of Punjab passed laws on the same subjects as well, because that was in the concurrent list, and we will discuss today how it was in the concurrent list. But if it was in the concurrent list, what would have happened? Can I say that parliamentary law always prevails? No. If the law is passed by the state legislature, if the bill is passed by the state legislature, such a bill has to be necessarily reserved for the consideration of the president. And if the president has given assent to this bill, then for that state only, the state law will prevail over parliamentary law. So in case of a clash, normally the parliamentary law prevails. But if the state law has been assented to by the president, has been signed by the president, then for that state, it is that state law which prevails over parliamentary law. And this is where some of the doctrines have also emerged over a period of time. Doctrine of pith and substance. What is this doctrine of pith and substance? Listen to me carefully. Rajasthan Legislative Assembly passed a law, and this bill primarily said that loudspeakers should be banned when after 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m. There is a ban on the use of loudspeakers after 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m. Why? In the interests of public health. Why? Because health is a subject under the state list. In the distribution of powers, state legislatures have the right, have the power to legislate on health. Matter went to the court. My lord, this bill is unconstitutional. Why? Because Rajasthan Legislative Assembly lacks competence in passing such a bill. This is not within the right, within the domain of Rajasthan legislature to pass such a bill. Why? Because loudspeakers deal with communication. And in the distribution of powers, communication is under the union list. So if at all loudspeakers are to be banned or regulated, that can be done only by Parliament, because communication is under the purview of the Parliament. State legislature cannot pass such a law. When matter went to the court, the Supreme Court innovated a doctrine known as Doctrine of Pith and Substance. In all such cases where there is an apparent clash between the parliamentary domain and the legislator's domain, in such a manner, what should we do? What should the judiciary do? Judiciary should have to look at what is the pith and substance of this law. What is the primary objective of this law? What is the primary motive of this law? The Supreme Court decided that the primary motive of this bill is to regulate public health. Now, to regulate public health, many actions could be taken by the state, which may encroach into the domain of the parliament. But that's okay. Why? Because the real purpose, the basic substance of this law is to regulate public health. This law is constitutional. Rajasthan legislature is competent in passing such a law. So what are you saying? What I'm saying is that there is distribution of powers between the center and the states. All items mentioned in the union list, Parliament alone has the power to make a law. All items mentioned in the state list, state legislature in normal circumstances has the power to make a law. All items in the concurrent list, both Parliament as well as state legislature has the power to make law. But what if there is a clash? On this subject, where both Parliament as well as state legislature have the power to make law, what if there is a clash between parliamentary law and state law? Normally, it is the parliamentary law which prevails. But if this law was passed by the state legislature and this law was assented to by the President of India, then even if there is a clash, it is the state law which prevails over parliamentary law. But what if state legislature is passing a law which is within its jurisdiction, but there is incidental encroachment into the domain of the parliament? Or parliament is passing a law which is under its competence, but there is accidental or incidental encroachment into the domain of the state. In such a situation, what will prevail? Sir, what is this incidental encroachment? Rajasthan tried to bring in a law to regulate, to control, to improve, to preserve public health. And how can we preserve public health? Noise pollution is a torture. There are elderly who can't sleep at night if loudspeakers are blazing. You will have to study for the civil services examination. What if there are noises coming from the religious places? We have to regulate them. Religion is a private matter between you and your Lord. Why should you use loudspeakers to blaze your volume? Maybe, although it is deeply offensive to some people as well. But I would say don't use loudspeakers for whatever reason. Why? Because even what you whisper will reach the God, if at all you believe it, or if at all the God is there. Then why do you use loudspeakers for that matter? And this is applicable across communities. So Rajasthan decided to pass a bill to control, improve public health, preserve public health. And one way to do that is ban the use of loudspeakers. If loudspeaker is under communication, which is under parliamentary domain, which is under union list, how can state legislature pass a law and ban loudspeakers? In this matter, the Supreme Court said we will have to look at what is the pith and substance of this bill. What is the real objective of this bill? If the real objective is health, which is within the domain of the state, there will be incidental encroachment. But on that ground, the law cannot be declared unconstitutional. Similarly, Parliament tomorrow may pass a law which is under its competence. For example, defense. There will be encroachment into the state list, such as law and order. But what is the real purpose? Defense of India. Even if there is encroachment into the state legislature, doesn't matter. We have to look at what is the real objective of this law. That is doctrine of pith and substance. But sir, if that is the case, you said agriculture is in the state list. How did the Parliament in 2020 enact the 3 farm laws, that too on agriculture? How's that possible? Which were these 3 farm laws? One was the Farmers Produce, Trade and Commerce, Farmers Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act, and then Essential Commodities Amendment Act 2020. These 3 farm laws you would discuss in economics, but I'll tell you very briefly so that you have an idea how Parliament tried to encroach into the domain of the state, whether that was correct or incorrect. For example, you are a farmer, you have produced a crop X. Let's say I am a farmer from Punjab. I sow seeds, I get the produce. Let's say I am producing paddy. Now, what I have to do, I have to sell it. Where do I sell it? In the nearest mandi. In the nearest mandi. But I could not have sold this in the mandi of any other district or any other state. I have to sell this in the nearest mandi. And in this nearest mandi, what happens? Auction takes place. This is wheat. This is paddy. This is my produce. I go to the nearest mandi and there it is auctioned. Whatever money I get, whatever money is generated because of this auction, I pocket that money and I go. I also pay the middleman. Who is this middleman? Somebody who facilitates this auction. For example, I have a historical dealings with a particular family. They take care of my produce. I just sow the seeds, get the produce, harvest the crop, and this crop I'm giving to this middleman. Then this middleman gets the best price for me by selling it in the mandi. He takes some of the commission and gives the remaining money to me. I am also happy, he is also happy. Why? Because I don't want to waste my time going to the mandi, nearest mandi, and then sell it. It's a cumbersome activity. I want to basically chill at home, whatever it is. But now, according to this law, when this bill was passed, originally these three laws were passed by way of ordinance. And we have discussed what is an ordinance. And then once the parliament was convened again, then these ordinances were replaced by bills. And then these bills were passed in the parliament. One problem with these laws was that there was no debate, no discussion on these laws. The bills were passed due to voice vote. Voice vote was taken, the bills were passed. When these bills were sent to the other house, to the Rajya Sabha, the opposition cried, screamed that please let's go for division of votes. And you know what is the difference between voice vote and division of votes. No division was taken because the vice president said there is ruckus, there is pandemonium in the house, we can't take the division. And ultimately, very small amount of discussion happened on these bills and the bills were passed. But be that as it may, the purpose of this law number 1 was, if I am a farmer, now I can sell the produce not only in the nearest mandi, but in any other mandi of the state or any other mandi of any other state as well. Because today, prior to this law, if I had to sell my produce in the mandi of a different state, for example, I'm from Punjab, I have to sell it in the mandi of Haryana because I realized that in Haryana, the value is much better for this crop. But I had to pay tax to the state government to sell this produce in the other state, in the neighboring state. But now because of this law, because of this bill, the government said, we will give freedom to the farmer. You have your crop. Take a look at in which state you will get the best produce for this crop and you sell it there. And whether you sell it in the nearest mandi or in any mandi of the state or in any other mandi of any other state, you don't have to pay tax. But farmers protested. Why farmers protested? Farmers thought that initially we will get the best produce of our crops. Where? In a neighboring state. Or we can even sell it to a businessman. Or we can sell it to any other entity, corporate entity as well. So initially we will get good produce. Remember, when Ola started, Uber started, sometimes you would take a ride for 1 rupee. Discount, 50% off, 75% off, cashback. So from Bengaluru airport to the city, it would take you 500 rupees or 6,000 rupees. Now it takes 3,300 rupees. Why? Because now they're sure that whatever alternative these people had previously, now they don't have that alternative. There is only one alternative. Now we have created duopoly, either Ola or Uber. Farmers thought that we have long standing relationship with these money lenders or with these middlemen. We would give them our crop, they would ensure the best produce for this crop, auction this crop, and give the money to us. Now, if we can sell it directly to a corporate, for example, Mr. Adani, for example, Mr. Ambani, for example, any other corporate entity, initially they will give us good value. That means we will keep on selling to them. What will happen to these middlemen? Ultimately, they will come out of job. They have no other reason to be in this business. They will start taking other businesses. That means our old age connect with these middlemen will be gone. Now we will be at the mercy of these corporates. And tomorrow they will give us peanuts instead of good value. So we don't want that according to farmer. But the government says this is for your benefit. Now you can sell not only in the nearest mandi, in any other mandi of your state, in any mandi of any other state as well, without any need to pay tax. This is for you because we want to double your income. But farmer said no. Law number 2, it was basically contract farming. Contract farming in the sense there is one multinational company which produces chips, these snacks, potato chips, for example. They will give me seed. This is my land. They will give me seeds. That you sow these seeds on this land, whatever potato is produced, you will sell these potato only to me, no one else. And that too at a predetermined price. What is that predetermined price? It was basically good for the farmer. Because today, if the farmer is producing tomato, my investment on producing 1 kg of tomato is 10 rupees, for example. But the prices in the market have crashed for tomatoes, for example. That means it takes me 10 rupees to produce 1 kg of tomato, but in the market the value is 5 rupees per kg of tomato, which means I am already at loss. And ultimately, this is the reason why farmers are committing suicide, because their investment on their farm produce is more than the market price of their commodities. But in contract farming, it will not happen. Because I am a corporate entity, you are the farmer, you have the piece of land, here is a contract. You take the seed, sow this, give us these potatoes, and we will determine right now what will be the price of that potato kg. It will be 10 rupees per kg. Do you agree? Yes, we agree. Let's sign this so that tomorrow, once you produce, no matter what is the price of potato in the market, whether it is 1 rupee or 2 rupee, I will still pay you 10 rupees per kg. This was a win-win situation for the farmer. Maybe. It's not that contract farming was something new, which was introduced because of this law. But what this law did, it provided a national framework for contract farming so that this can be applied throughout the country. Farmers said, we don't need this. Why? Because farmers are not judicially literate. There is no judicial literacy. So when a corporate entity and a small farmer will enter into a contract, it may also mean that over a period of time, the terms of the contract would be such that this corporate entity can take away the land as well. Should farmer invest his time in sowing crops, injecting fertilizers, ensuring that the crop is well, or should the farmer be getting himself involved in the nitty-gritties of this contract with a corporate entity? Even if tomorrow there is a dispute, they can hire a top-notch lawyer and these farmers cannot. So you will be bound by these corporate entities to unfavorable contracts. Ultimately, you will lose your land. That is why we don't agree with this contract farming law, says the farmers. Government said, this is for your benefit. Even before you sow the crop, you get to know what is the price that you will get for that crop. If you're okay, proceed. If you're not, go away. Third, Essential Commodities Act, Amendment Act 2020. What is an essential commodity? For example, the prices of onions have increased. Let's say the price is now 200 rupees per kg. How is this price determined? You would know that better. You're the students of economics, or you will learn it in the economics. My limited understanding tells me that it is because of the demand and supply. If the demand for a particular good, particular crop, for example, is high, that means people are willing to pay more price to get 1 kg of onion. The price of onion will go up. If the supply of this onion is less, but the demand is more, supply less, demand more and more people are demanding, okay, instead of 10 rupees per kg, I'm willing to pay 50 rupees, I'm willing to pay 100 rupees, but give me 1 kg of onion because it's the festival season, I need onions. So there are some people who try to take advantage of this situation. Somebody like me. What I will do, I will take 1000 kg of onion and I will store it somewhere. I will hoard it. That's what we call hoarding practice. So there are onions in the market, but and along with me, there are hundreds of such selfish individuals who will buy this crop, hoard them, creating artificial scarcity in the market. Which means now artificially we are creating a sense where the supply of onions is less, demand is high. So I bought this kg of onion at 10 rupees. But by creating an artificial scarcity, the prices go up. Now once it reaches 100 rupees per kg, I supply onions in the market. Whenever government realizes that there is a particular crop, for example, whose demand has shot up, the prices have reached sky high, onions, tomatoes, they will notify that this particular crop is an essential commodity. When it is an essential commodity, that means then the government officers, people who are responsible for ensuring supply in the market, they will raid some stores. And if you have stored and hoarded this crop beyond a certain limit, that crop will be confiscated and will be thrown into the market. Which means I bought onions for 10 rupees a kg. And with me, there were hundreds of others who created artificial scarcity. Now I have hoarded 1000 kgs of onions. But once the government says that prices of onions have skyrocketed, it is an essential commodity now, that means if I am holding or hoarding this crop beyond a certain limit, that crop will be confiscated, will be thrown into the market. That means we are now supplying onions into the market. That is Essential Commodities Act. But this act was amended in 2020. Some items were excluded from essential commodity. For example, tomatoes. For example, pulses. For example, onions. That means tomorrow, even if artificial scarcity is created, tomorrow, even if the prices skyrocket, we will not declare onions as the essential commodity or tomatoes as the essential commodity. The government was asked, but why? Said, see, we want private investment in agriculture. Very good. What sort of private investment? We want private sector to come forward and set up cold storage. What is this cold storage? There are crops which are perishable. There are crops which are non-perishable. For example, fruits. There are perishable fruits, perishable crops. Tomato, for example, what is the shelf life of a tomato? Once it is harvested, it will survive for a week maybe, or 10 days maybe. How can we increase the shelf life of these tomatoes or these goods? Store them in a cold area and their shelf life will increase. But we are not talking about one refrigerator at our home, 350 liters of a refrigerator. We are talking about storing thousands of quintals of tomatoes and other perishable goods. For that, the private sector will have to come forward and develop cold storage. For example, for apples, cold storage facilities need to be developed. That investment will come from private sector. So if on one hand we are telling private sector, please set up cold storage so that you can store, increase the shelf life of these crops, and they have set up, they have stored the crops. Now we tell them this crop is an essential commodity, that means withdraw this. Why would they invest in the first place? That's why we need to bring some items out of the essential commodity list. Farmer said, no, this is another way of this government to support its capitalist class, because they will set up cold storage. They will buy produce from us at cheap rates, at 1 rupee per kg, 2 rupee per kg. Then they will store this in this cold storage, creating artificial scarcity. And ultimately, they will supply this produce back in the circulation when the prices would reach 50 rupees a kg. So who will get profit? The corporates. And who will be at loss? The farmers who invested time, money, resources in producing these crops. It's all about intention. What is the intention of the government? What is the intention of the farmers? Are the farmers protesting just for the sake of it? Or is government really responsible for supporting the capitalist class? We don't know. We don't know the reason, but these 3 farm ordinances were issued. Then bills were passed to replace these ordinances. These bills got the sign, signature, assent of the President of India. The 3 farm laws became acts. Farmers protested, particularly in Punjab and Haryana, and ultimately government succumbed to their pressure and repealed the 3 farm laws. But we are not here to discuss whether these laws were good or bad. We have to discuss how Parliament could have enacted this law. Because all these laws appear that they are enacted for agriculture. And agriculture is in a state list. If in the distribution of power, agriculture is in a state list, how can Parliament enact a law on agriculture? Agriculture is a state subject. If you look at entry 14, item 14 of list 2, state list, agriculture is mentioned. Not just this, entry 26 in list 2, that means item 26 in list 2, it talks about trade and commerce within the state. I am a farmer. I can sell this produce in the nearest mandi, known as APMC, Agricultural Produce Market Committee. I can sell it in the nearest APMC mandi, or I can sell it in the APMC mandi anywhere else in the state. But my dear, this is the job of the state to decide. Because item 26 in state list talks about trade and commerce within the state. Who has the power to make a law on trade and commerce within the state? That power is with the state legislature. How can Parliament enact this law? Similarly, item 27 mentioned in the state list talks about production, supply, distribution of goods. One such good is an agricultural good. Production of this agricultural good, supply of this, distribution of this, who has the power to make a law? State legislature. Why is Parliament enacting a law? Entry 28 talks about markets and fairs. This APMC Mandi is a market where auction of agricultural products takes place. Who has the power to make a law? State legislature. Who is making a law? Parliament. For all these reasons, intrastate marketing, that means marketing in agriculture within the state, was always considered to be the legislative prerogative of the states under the genuine legitimate domain of the states. So was Parliament wrong in passing the 3 laws? Was Parliament incompetent in passing these laws? Because that was under the legislative competence of the state legislatures? No. Why? Because we have entry 33 in list 3. What is entry 33? That means item number 33. In list 3, what is list 3? Concurrent list. What is concurrent list? It says trade and commerce in, trading in, production, supply and distribution of what? If we have to trade and do business, if we have to produce, supply and distribute what? Products of any industry where the control of such industry by the union is declared by the parliament to be in public interest. This will come under concurrent list. That means tomorrow parliament can enact any law if it is in public interest and say that this particular good, its production, its supply, its distribution, its trade, its commerce, who has the power to make a law? Both parliament as well as state legislature. Because it is in concurrent list. Not just that, these products means foodstuffs, including edible oil seeds, cattle fodder, raw cotton, raw jute, any product in agricultural domain. If parliament thinks it fit that its trade and commerce, its production, supply and distribution in larger public interest, then parliament becomes empowered to pass a law. State legislature can also pass a law, but in case there is a conflict, it's the parliamentary law which will prevail. That is why I told you once the 3 farm laws were passed, Captain Amarinder Singh was the Chief Minister of Punjab. The Legislative Assembly of Punjab passed the law, which basically was against the 3 farm laws, because it was enacted under the concurrent list. So when parliament can enact a law under item 33 of concurrent list, state legislature can also make a law. But this bill was reserved for the consideration of the president. President did not give the permission. And even then, that means the parliamentary law prevails. But this entry 33 of list 3 of concurrent list, it was not always meant to be there. Article 369 of the Constitution, original Constitution, the responsibility of agricultural trade and commerce within a state was temporarily entrusted to the Union government for a period of 5 years beginning 1950. Unfortunately, we were not self-sufficient in food. That is why there came a time when in the 1960s, our Prime Minister, Srimati Gandhi, had to visit United States with a begging bowl. Give us food. And United States, under its PL 480 scheme, Public Law 480 scheme, gave us food items in the 1960s and early 70s. And at that time, Washington Post published a front page news article, Indian Prime Minister comes begging, because we were not self-sufficient in food. Even if we were not self-sufficient in food, there were some states which were self-sufficient, other states were not. You have a family, and the family consists of 5 kids, 5 children. Can any father or mother even condone, accept, facilitate that there will be 2 kids who will eat well and there will be 3 other kids who will be starving? No one would even appreciate it. So can the Indian state appreciate that there are some states which are self-sufficient in food? They're eating well, their citizens are eating well, they are also wasting the food, and there are others who are dying of hunger. If agriculture is in the state list, some states could have done that. Because after all, it's a political matter. If Punjab is self-sufficient in food, Punjab will say, I will not distribute this food to Bihar or to Telangana or to a northeastern state. I won't do that. That means after the independence, some states would have been self-sufficient in food, others would not have been, and others were not. Can the state act as a mute spectator and see people dying of hunger while others are overfeeding their citizens? That is why this matter was kept under concurrent list only for 5 years. That means responsibility of agricultural trade and commerce, it was given to center as well, parliament as well, under concurrent list for a period of 5 years. That means from 1950 till 1955. With the hope that in these 5 years we will become self-sufficient in food. Then parliament need not interfere in agricultural matters. But then very soon the government realized that no, this is a long project. We cannot complete this project in 5 years. In 5 years, we cannot make India self-sufficient in food. So we have to get involved in agriculture. And what was meant to be temporary for 5 years became permanent because of Third Constitutional Amendment Act 1954. So this trade and commerce, production, supply and distribution of goods related to food, related to foodstuff, related to oil seeds, related to any other food product, it was meant to be under concurrent list only for 5 years. But what was meant to be under concurrent list for 5 years became permanent forever and ever and ever because of this Third Constitutional Amendment Act in 1954. When this bill was introduced in the parliament, when this constitutional amendment bill was introduced in the parliament, there were some members of the parliament who objected, protested, saying this is against federalism. You are snatching the power of the state. You are entering into the domain of the state. Ashok Mehta, for example, he warned that today you are saying trade and commerce in agriculture will be under concurrent list. Tomorrow you will also say crop planning and cultivation also is under us. That means tomorrow you will dictate a state what you can sow, what you cannot. This goes against the spirit of federalism. Don't do that. Don't pass this bill. Another member, Mr. K.K. Basu, he said through this constitutional amendment, you are converting our federal constitution into a unitary constitution. And you have reduced the powers of the state to mere municipalities. We thought that these are states which have their own powers, but you have reduced them to mere municipalities because of this amendment. This is a wrong, bad legislation, which you are introducing as an innocuous piece of legislation. Innocuous piece. You give it a sense that this is very honest piece, honest law. This is not harmful at all. This is driven by good mentality, good intention. But this is violation of the federal character of Indian Constitution. When Parliament wants to get involved in agriculture, in crop cultivation, in crop usage, everything related to agriculture. Maybe the concerns of Ashok Mehta and K.K. Basu proved to be true in 2020 when the 3 farm laws were passed, which, no matter from which angle you look at it, encroaches into the domain of the agriculture which is in the state list. Long story short, we are looking at legislative relations between the center and the states. For that, we know that the law passed by the parliament will be applicable throughout the country. Law passed by the state legislature will be applicable only with respect to that state. And parliament alone has the power to make extraterritorial jurisdiction, to make extraterritorial laws. That means the laws passed by the parliament will be applicable to Indian citizens and their property abroad as well. And Schedule 7 of the Constitution, which is mentioned under Article 246 of the Constitution, divides the legislative subjects into union list, state list, and concurrent list. Clear? Then how, if agriculture is under the state list, how Parliament enacted the 3 farm laws in 2020? We have discussed the reasons now. Because Parliament used its concurrent power. Because under item 33 of concurrent list, trade and commerce in food items, production, supply and goods, production, supply and distribution of food goods, it's under concurrent list. That means Parliament can also make a law, state can also make a law. So Parliament invoked entry 33 in passing the 3 farm laws. Done? Then not just this, we have state list. Which talks about 61 items. Police, land, agriculture, gambling, so on and so forth. We say it is within the domain of the state legislature to enact a law on any item mentioned in the state list. But under Article 249 of the Constitution, when the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by two-thirds majority of members present and voting, then what Parliament can do? Parliament can enact a law in state list, under state list. Validity of this law is 1 year. Extended n times. But each time after Rajya Sabha approval. This is where now we are coming closer and closer and closer to one big theme. Despite federalism, it is the center which is more powerful. And for that, the term which has been used is centralized federalism. That means although we are a federal constitution, although we follow federalism, although we are a federal polity, but there are some provisions in the constitution which are biased in favor of a strong center, which makes center powerful against the states. And those provisions which make center more powerful as against the state give a sense that we have a centralized federalism, that despite federalism, center is more powerful. There are more powers concentrated with center. One example of that is laws passed by the parliament are applicable throughout the country. That means the territorial jurisdiction of parliamentary law is wider than that of the state, which is understood. But more items are there in union list than in state list. Which means who are you giving more powers to? Center. Not just this. If this is union list, state list, concurrent list, who has the residuary power? That residuary power is with the parliament. In United States, this residuary power is with the states. What is residuary power? Residue is whatever else is left. Can we mention everything in union list, state list, concurrent list? No. What if there is an item which appears later? Later in the sense, right now we have no idea about it, but it may appear later. And later, once it appears, Who will we allocate this item to? Because it's residue. It is not mentioned currently in union list, state list, concurrent list. For example, service tax. Who would have imagined in 1950s that there would be something known as a service on which tax can also be imposed? Service, for example, you go for a haircut, that's a service. On that you have to pay the tax, service tax. You buy an insurance product. It's not a tangible product, it's an insurance product. On that you have to pay tax, that's a service tax. Who can impose such a tax? Who has the jurisdiction to import such a tax? Because it's a residue. It was not originally mentioned in union list, state list, concurrent list. That residuary subject power is given to the parliament, not to the state legislature, which makes it even more clear that our constitution is biased in favor of a strong center. Because if we were following US constitution, this residuary power would have been given to the states. Not just that, even those items which are given to the states, if Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by 2/3 of the members present and voting, saying it is in national interest that Parliament should enact a law on state list, Parliament now becomes empowered to make a law on state list. And what is the validity of this law? The law is valid for a year. Can it be extended again? Yes, but get the approval from Rajya Sabha. Can it be extended further? Yes, but get the approval from Rajya Sabha. And Rajya Sabha will give you approval by passing a resolution by 2/3 of the members present and voting. So even in areas where the states have their power, but Parliament can still make a law, which means centralized federalism. But then you will say, so what? It is with Rajya Sabha's approval. And what is Rajya Sabha? Rajya Sabha is the Council of States. Rajya Sabha is the Council of States. It represents, protects the interests of the states. So if the states together, they have approved that yes, Parliament can make a law on state list for a period of 1 year, then what's wrong with that? Because after all, it is a national interest. This is not centralized federalism, this is cooperative federalism. So it depends on what lens do you use to see a particular matter. Same Article 249 can be viewed from two different extremes. One extreme is, see what our constitution is. States have no right. States have no jurisdiction. No dignity is given to the state. You see, one, more items are given to union as against the states. Second, even those items which are given to the states, Parliament can make a law. See, what sort of logic is this? This is centralized federalism. Another extreme. No, this is cooperative federalism, where the states are cooperating with the center for the national interest. It's not that every time Parliament will enact a law on state list. It is only when national interest is involved. When was it involved? For example, in the 1980s, late 1980s, when terrorism emerged in Jammu and Kashmir. Law and order is a state subject. So state legislature should have passed a law. But at that time, Rajya Sabha passed a resolution by 2/3 of the members present and voting, saying it is in national interest for this particular state, law should be made by the Parliament on law and order. But it will be valid for 1 year. After that, if you want extension, come back to us. After that, if you want extension, come back to us. After that, if you want extension, come back to us. Because who are we? We are the Council of States. We represent the interests of states. And in the interest of the states, in national interest, we will cooperate with you. That is cooperative federalism. So it depends on which lens do you use to look at this particular item. Even then, Article 250, during national emergency, when and where Parliament assumes concurrent power of legislation. During national emergency, Parliament can enact a law on any item mentioned in the state list. And this law remains in force during the entire period of national emergency, and this law shall lapse 6 months from the date of revocation of national emergency. During national emergency, state legislatures are present. Yes, we've discussed. During national emergency, it may not be possible to hold election. Yes. During national emergency, the term of the Legislative Assembly can be increased by a year. Yes. Can be increased by another year, another year, another year. What is the upper limit of national emergency? We don't know. Why? Because we never know till what time war will continue, external aggression will continue, armed rebellion will continue. There is no upper limit to national emergency. But during national emergency, Parliament has the power to make a law on any item mentioned in the state list. Until what time will this law continue? This law will continue throughout the period of national emergency. And once national emergency is revoked today, whether it is lapsed today or it is revoked today, this law will continue for a further period of 6 months. After 6 months, this law will lapse. One lens to look at this is, see, this is centralized federalism. You know, there are 61 items that are given to us, states. But during national emergency, Parliament can make a law on any item mentioned in the state list. What sort of logic is this? What sort of justice is this? We are not a federal polity. We are centralized federalism. Others will say federalism means national interest is paramount. Indian federalism is unique. Despite federalism, despite center and states having their own domains, despite this, national interest is paramount. Because if there is war, if there is external aggression, if there is armed rebellion, because of which there is a danger to the unity, integrity, sovereignty of India, during that period only, Parliament will have the power to make a law on state list as well. But this is a national interest to protect this country, to save this country, to ensure and uphold the unity, integrity, and sovereignty of India. That is why. Otherwise, in normal circumstances, states have the power to make their own laws. Parliament will never interfere. So, despite federalism, national interest is paramount. That is reflective in Article 250. Depends on which way you see this issue. Not just this. 252. Another weak point in our federal system where states are at a disadvantage, center is more powerful, and that is the term that we use for it, centralized federalism. When two or more states make a request, then Parliament is empowered to make a law on that subject with respect to those states. Under Article 252, if two or more states we have 28 states. If two or more states make a request that, dear Parliament, this is our state list, please make a law on this. That means states themselves are requesting Parliament, please enact a law on state list. This amounts to surrender. And Parliament may never give you that subject back. One way to look at this is centralized federalism. See, now center is so powerful that it can take one subject from us. It is as if we have surrendered that subject, and that subject will never be returned back to us. That means Parliament all alone will make laws on those subjects for those states which have made a request. Others will say you are foolish. Why did you request in the first place? You should not have requested. Parliament would not have done this. So why do this? Depends on what way you look at it. But it's not that the states are without logic when they request. For example, organ donation and transplantation, wildlife, on various other matters, urban land sealing. There is one patient in Chennai who has donated his heart. And now this heart is to be transported to Bengaluru so that it is beneficial for a patient who is waiting for a heart transplant in Bengaluru. Imagine the difficulty it would have arisen if there were different set of laws in Tamil Nadu, different set of laws related to organ donation in Karnataka. It would lead to chaos, confusion, and ultimately our purpose of ensuring organ donation and transplantation would take a hit. This is where the states have requested. Dear Parliament, all of us, we request you, please enact a law, because you can make a law which will be applicable throughout the territory of India. You make a law and you regulate, you tell us how organ donation and transplantation will take place. States are requesting, Parliament, please enact a law. But that means you have surrendered this subject. On this subject now you cannot make this law. Only Parliament can. Similarly, wildlife. Why should be the rules for wildlife be different for Madhya Pradesh's national park and for Tamil Nadu's national park? It has to be common because the common purpose is to preserve wildlife, promote our ecosystem. That's why the states themselves have requested, please enact a law. This is cooperative federalism. This is not centralized federalism. In 1969, there were 11 states who made this request. That, dear Parliament, we are the 11 states. We request you, you make a law on urban land sealing. That means in urban areas, what is the amount of land that a particular individual can hold, can acquire, can possess? You decide that. So when two or more states request, then Parliament is empowered to make a law on state list, which they have requested. But this law would be applicable to only those states who make this request, not to the other states. If 11 states have made a request for Parliament to enact a law on urban land ceiling, this parliamentary law will be applicable only for those 11 states, not for the other states which did not make the request. One would call it centralized federalism. Someone else would say this is cooperative federalism, where the states, in the larger national interest, they want to give up their powers and cooperate with the center for the national project. This is cooperative federalism. Article 253. In 2013, the recent example, 10-year-old example, Lokpal and Lokayukt these bills were passed by the parliament, which we will discuss in governance. Lokpal at the central level is an institution who can investigate corruption allegations against the Prime Minister, against the ministers, against the parliamentarians as well. For example, whether Ms. Mahua Moitra has indeed indulged in corruption by taking bribe in return for asking questions in the parliament. Mr. Dubey, member of the parliament from the BJP from Jharkhand, he has approached Lokpal, please investigate Mahua Moitra. But this is at the central level, Lokpal. At the state level, we have a Lokayukta, who will investigate corruption allegations against the chief minister, against the ministers, against the legislators of that state, against the bureaucrats of that state as well. But who enacted this law? Parliament. And this is another example of centralized federalism, where more powers are given to the center. How can Parliament make a law for a Lokayukta at the state level? Shouldn't that have been the responsibility of the state itself? No. Why? Because this law was passed in pursuance with or according to United Nations Convention against Corruption. And this United Nations Convention against Corruption was ratified by India in around 2006. For example, India and Germany enter into an agreement, or India and WTO enter into an agreement, or India and ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, they enter into a free trade agreement. Clear? Or India has signed and ratified a United Nations Convention. To ratify that convention, to give shape to that convention, to give shape to that international agreement, Parliament can make a law even if it encroaches into the domain of the state. When we ratified United Nations Convention against Corruption, what is the meaning of ratification? That means once you have ratified, you have to take steps. You have to pass a law. You have to create institutions which can prevent corruption in your country. Now, to prevent corruption in your country, you need steps to be taken at the central level as well. You need steps to be taken at the state level as well. But who can make a law for that? Parliament. Why? Because to implement international agreements, to implement international treaties, Parliament alone has the power to make a law under Article 253, even if this law encroaches into the domain of the states. That's Article 253. But not just this. During President's rule, when under Article 356, President's rule is imposed, Parliament is empowered to make a law. And this law is on state list. And this law What is the validity of this law? This law continues even after the revocation of president's rule. The law passed by the parliament on state list during national emergency. This law will continue as long as national emergency is in place. Once national emergency is revoked today, this law will continue for a further period of 6 months. After that, it lapses. But that is not the case when a law is passed by the parliament during president's rule. A law passed by the parliament during president's rule for that particular state, which is under Article 356, this law continues. Even after president's rule is gone, this law will still continue. But after the president's rule is gone, if there is fresh election in that state, new legislature has been set up. If that new legislature decides to keep this law will continue. If that legislature decides to repeal this law, they can repeal this law. That means the law passed by the parliament during president's rule is not dependent upon the continuance of president's rule. This law will continue even after the president's rule is gone, even after the president's rule is revoked. That means this law will continue forever unless revoked by the state legislature. Clear? Then not just this, there is central control even over state legislation. And this is where it becomes problematic. And this is where we can say that center is more powerful against the state. It is not cooperative federalism, it is centralized federalism. Even in those items where the state has the power to make law, governor can reserve any bill for the consideration of the president, including a money bill. State legislature is passing a law on law and order, land, police, gambling, agriculture. This bill is sent to governor. Governor is not acting on this bill. Governor is reserving this bill for the consideration of the president. This is happening in Telangana. This is happening in Tamil Nadu. And now the matter is before the Supreme Court. The matter is, how can this governor be a mechanical office? It's just like mechanically, like a motor. The bill has come from the state legislature to the governor. Governor reserves it for the president. Bill has come, reserved for president. Bill has come, reserved. It's like a mechanical exercise. And this really hampers the governance of a state. Then is India, that is Bharat, a union of states? Or is India, that is Bharat, a union of union territories? Because through this office of governor, you are reducing the states to mere municipalities. Not just this. There are previous sanctions required for some bills. For example, a bill under Article 304. A bill under Article 304 cannot be even introduced in the state legislature without the prior sanction of the President of India. Without his sanction, without her sanction, you cannot introduce this bill on the floor of the state legislature. And what is that bill? Let's say Tamil Nadu wants to pass a bill. It wants to restrict interstate trade and commerce. In a sense, Tamil Nadu says we will not buy any product from Karnataka. Any goods, any bus coming from Karnataka will be stopped. We won't accept it. Karnataka says the same thing. We will pass a law, and any goods or services coming from Tamil Nadu will not enter Karnataka. Can we allow such a bill? No. Why? Because then it defeats the whole purpose of fraternity, which is one of the objectives of the Constitution. Such a bill you have to necessarily reserve for the consideration of the President. In a sense, you have to seek the prior approval of the President of India. The government will have to tell the President, can we introduce this bill in our legislature? President will obviously say, no, you can't. That means you can't even proceed with this bill. But what if sometimes it is necessary? Sometimes it is necessary. Maybe there is some outbreak, maybe whatever reason, maybe we want to preserve some flourishing industry of a particular state. For example, jute industry in West Bengal. And we don't want jute industry from Tamil Nadu to interfere here because we want to preserve and protect the interest of our jute industry. If the West Bengal government can convince the President will act on the advice of the central government that, okay, you can introduce this bill, you can restrict the entry of jute industry from any state into West Bengal. If such a bill is given the permission, given the prior sanction of the President of India, then it is okay. That means there are some bills which cannot be introduced in the state legislature without the prior approval recommendation of the President. And even if there are bills which you are passing, which is within your competence, which is in state list, any such bill can be reserved for the consideration of the President by the governor. And the President on all these bills enjoys absolute veto. And then there is something known as financial emergency, which we have discussed. During financial emergency, directives can be issued by the center to the state that your money bills reserve for the President. Your budget reserve for the President. Any bill talking about withdrawal of money from consolidated fund of the state, reserve for the President. So center exercising control over a state, even in financial matters. All of this put together tells us either we are a centralized federalism, where despite federalism, center has more power, or we are a classic example of cooperative federalism, where center and states, they are cooperating with each other for the larger national interest. That is center-state legislative relations. Any questions, let me know, then we will jump to administrative relations. Sir, can J&K legislation repeal the President ordinance made previously that J&K continue as union territory with legislative assembly after President's rule? No, it cannot, because that is after all a parliamentary law. It's not a state law. It's a parliamentary law. If it was a law passed by the parliament on police, on land, all those changes can be made. For example, the domicile rules that were changed in J&K, the land rules which were changed, all those can be repealed by the new legislature. But it will remain whatever parliament says it to be, whether union territory with legislative assembly or a state with legislative assembly, because that comes under Article 3. Federalism, then you have to give all these examples and counter examples if the question is to justify cooperative federalism. For peace and progress of J&K, yes, because this is something which is applicable to Puducherry as well. Whatever is applicable to Puducherry is applicable to J&K. Follow it. Then directive can be issued by the center to the states. Follow this. If you can't, then it can be assumed there is breakdown of constitutional machinery. President's rule can be imposed in that state. For example, Citizenship Act. If West Bengal says we will not abide by this law, a directive will be issued under Article 365 to the center. You have to abide by the parliamentary law passed by the parliament. If you don't, your government will be dismissed. President's rule can be imposed in West Bengal. Extend that law. Otherwise, no. Ante will be restored, which means whatever the position of J&K was on August 5, 2019 morning, that status will come back. But that looks unlikely. But that is what will happen if all the actions are declared unconstitutional. (745) to Article 263. You don't have to remember the article numbers, just understand the concept. Distribution of executive power. Distribution of executive power. Constitution says executive power of every state is to be exercised in such a way so that it complies with the laws made by the parliament and any law which is applicable in that state, so as not to impede or prejudice the exercise of the executive power of the center in the state. What does that mean? The laws passed by the legislature are applied within that state. The laws passed by the parliament are applicable throughout the territory of India. Clear? But when we look at the administrative relations, what are these administrative relations? For example, state has the executive power. Chief Minister and Council of Ministers, all executive powers are with the governor. They have the responsibility of ensuring law and order within that state because that's under the domain of the state. But there is also army. Can West Bengal says that army is not allowed in West Bengal? Army reports to the center. The president is the supreme commander of Indian armed forces. Can it happen? No. Why? Because your executive power shall not impede, shall not restrict, shall not prejudice the executive power of the center. Airports are there in states, but they are under the control of the center. Can tomorrow Tamil Nadu say that our airport, the security of that airport will now be the responsibility of the state police because the executive power of the state is within the entire state? Law and order is the responsibility of the state. Can the Tamil Nadu state do that? No. Why? Because you can't prejudice, impede, restrict the executive power of the center. Similarly, all the states will have to comply with the laws passed by the parliament or any law which is passed in that state. So if tomorrow there is a Citizenship Amendment Act which is now applicable, although it has not been enforced yet because the rules have not been made, once the rules are made, can any state, for example, Telangana or Bihar or West Bengal, say that we will not implement Citizenship Amendment Act in India? No, you can't do that. Why? Because that would be against the constitution. Because states have the obligation that they have to ensure that their executive power is vested in such a manner, exercised in such a manner, that it does not restrict the executive power of the center. States have the power to implement law and order, to ensure development of your state. Can tomorrow a state say that we will not have all India services officers working in our states? Because who are these all India service officers? IAS officers, IPS officers, forest service officers. But these officers are reporting to the center, accountable to the center, trained by the center, appointed by the center, can be removed by the center. But where are they working? They are working in the states. Can tomorrow any state say, no, these IAS officers, IPS officers, forest service officers, they are not acceptable to us? No, you can't do that because that would be violation of the constitution. This is where we come across some directives that the center can issue to the states. And these directives, I have told you previously, they are coercive in nature. That means center can force you to accept it, coerce you into accepting this. If you don't accept, then president's rule can be imposed in your state. All these directives can be issued under Article 365 of the Constitution. What are these directives? The construction and maintenance of means of communication, which are declared to be of national importance. You have to construct those means of communication. You have to maintain those means of communication. State has the obligation to do that. For example, national highways. If the state fails to abide by this directive, then under Article 356, President's rule can be imposed. The measures to be taken for the protection of railways within the state. Railways are under the center, but railways travel throughout the states. If the center has issued a directive to a state under Article 365 that you have to take measures to protect the interest of railways, what if the state fails to abide to do that? It can be viewed that there is breakdown of constitutional machinery. President's rule can be imposed. Similarly, a directive can be issued by the center to the state that in your state there are people of linguistic minorities. There are linguistic minorities. And you have to teach them till their primary stage, till their fifth standard in their own mother tongue. If you fail to abide by this directive, then President's rule can be imposed. President's rule can be imposed. It's not necessary to impose, can be imposed. Similarly, drawing up and executing schemes for the welfare of the scheduled tribes in that state. If there are schemes which have been designed, conceptualized by the center for the welfare of the STs, if the state fails to implement these schemes, directive can be issued under Article 365. Please implement them. If you don't, then it can be viewed that there is breakdown of constitutional machinery. President's rule can be imposed in that state. That means in legislative matters, in legislative relations between center and the state, we looked at that the states are at a disadvantage as compared to the center. The constitution has been designed in such a manner that despite federalism, there are some provisions which make a strong center. That's what we call centralized federalism. And this concept of centralized federalism becomes even more evident when we look at the administrative relations between center and the state, where the balance tilts in favor of the strong center. But even then, there is something known as cooperative federalism. Any instance where the center is cooperating with the state, it is cooperative federalism. In financial matters, one beautiful example of cooperative federalism is GST, which I told you would discuss in economics, goods and services tax. Because before GST, center had its own taxation power, state had its own taxation power. In a sense, that center can impose income tax, center can impose corporate tax. Those are direct taxes. But center could impose also service tax. States were imposing VAT, value addition tax. Center was imposing tax on the manufacture of goods. State was imposing tax on the distribution of goods. But then it was decided that let's remove cascading nature of taxes. What is this cascading nature of tax? Basically, tax on tax. What is this tax on tax? Although there was no need for me to enter the domain of economics, but very briefly to understand what is this cooperative federalism. You are manufacturing shirt For example, for the manufacturing of shirts, you need raw materials. Let's say raw material is cotton, raw material is polyester. This is a raw material. As a manufacturer, when I procure these raw materials, I have to pay tax. Then these raw materials are used for the manufacture of shirt. Then on this shirt which is manufactured, I had to pay tax again. Then these shirts are to be distributed to a wholesaler. I had to pay tax again. Then the wholesaler had to pay tax. Then finally you are the consumer, you have to pay tax. So tax on tax on tax on tax, that is how the value of this good increased. Government said, let's introduce VAT. Let's not pay tax on tax, let's pay tax on the value which has increased. Which means the tax that you paid on raw material, then you use that raw material to manufacture this shirt. Now you have to pay tax on the value which you have added. That means you don't have to pay tax again on those raw materials. You have to pay tax on whatever shirt you have manufactured. That means whatever cost you incurred in manufacturing this shirt minus the cost that you incurred in taking these raw materials, whatever else is left, that is the tax that you have to pay. That means now it won't be tax on tax, it will be tax on value addition. And ultimately, the burden of this tax is on the final consumer. And what is this burden? That means you have to pay VAT. That means final tax you have to pay, but I'm collecting it from you and then paying to the government. And I will also get input credit. That means if the final consumer is paying the tax, I have already paid tax on the raw material. Now, since I have collected this tax, I have deposited this tax with the government, I will get the input credit. That tax on the raw material, I will get refunded. The primary intention was, with the introduction of GST, the prices of commodities will reduce. Ultimately, the demand will increase, which ultimately leads to GDP growth. But to implement this GST, we needed cooperation from the states. Why? Because now instead of VAT, we will have a GST. If center was imposing tax on the manufacture of goods, state was imposing tax on the distribution of goods. Now we say both center as well as state can impose tax on the manufacture as well as distribution. For that, states had to give up its power. Center had to give up its power. Because previously only center could have imposed tax on service. Now states can also. Previously only states could have imposed tax on the distribution of goods. Now center can also do that. That means they are sharing their taxation powers. What is this? Cooperation. This is cooperative federalism, where the states, they give up their certain powers for the larger national interest, where the center, it gives up some of its powers for the larger national interest. Any such instance where the center and the state, they're coming together, cooperating with each other for the national interest, that is cooperative federalism. And our constitution has some provisions which implement cooperative federalism. This concept we have borrowed from Australia. There are some constitutional provisions of creating this cooperation, and there are some extra constitutional provisions which facilitate this cooperation. That means there are some things mentioned in the constitution itself which we can say point to cooperative federalism, where center and states are cooperating with each other. And apart from that, there are some extra constitutional provisions as well. Those provisions which are not mentioned in the constitution, but which facilitate the cooperation between center and the state. What is that? Cooperative federalism. What are these constitutional provisions? Number one, Article 258, Article 258 capital A, mutual delegation of powers. What is this mutual delegation of powers? Here is president. And here is governor. All the executive powers of the union are with president. All the executive powers of the state are with governor. What can happen? President will delegate some of her executive powers to the state, to the governor. But this time, with the consent of the governor. What may also happen, governor can delegate some of his executive powers to the president, but with the consent of the president. That means, what are these two entities doing? Center and state cooperating with each other, delegating some of its executive powers to each other, with each other's consent, not through force, through consent. What is this cooperation? Sir, any examples? Yes. For example, Mr. Modi has said Olympic Games would be held in India. We will bid for the Olympic Games very soon. Maybe 2036 Olympic Games will be held in India. But where in India? For that, we have to pick one city. Olympic Games in Sydney, Olympic Games in Beijing, Olympic Games in Los Angeles, Olympic Games in Bengaluru or Chennai. Let's say Olympic Games in Chennai. More than 203 countries would participate. Their athletes, their functionaries, which basically means that law and order is something that we have to ensure. Law and order is under the control of governor, chief minister, council of ministers, advising the governor on law and order, and it is binding on the governor to accept that advice. What the governor will do, governor will say, Madam President, can I come and meet you? Yes, please come. I have the executive power to ensure law and order maintenance in Chennai. But in Chennai, Olympic Games are to be held. I don't think I can manage law and order. Can I delegate this power to you for some time? That means during Olympic Games, it will be your responsibility of ensuring law and order. Once Olympic Games are over, you will give me this power back. You will delegate this power back to me. Can it happen? President will say, okay, problem solved. During Olympic Games in Chennai, it will be the responsibility of the center to ensure law and order. Mutually, we have agreed to do this. What is this? Cooperative federalism. Where is it mentioned? In the constitution itself. Or president will say, Governor, come here. So, ma'am, what? I have the executive power, and that I know. Census, do you know, every 10 years we carry out census. Although this time we have not carried out, but for that you need to get the answer from the Prime Minister. But census is the responsibility of the center. And to carry out census exercise, we need your cooperation. Said, yes, we will cooperate. How? Basically, census should be carried out by the center, but center does not have so many employees. In your state, you have a lot of state employees. Can we delegate this power to you that you will carry out the census exercise in your state? And once that exercise is over, we will take this power back from you? Sure, sir. Agreed. Mutually, you're agreeing with each other. Mutually, center is giving some delegating executive power to the state. State is delegating some executive power to the center. Mutually, with each other's consent. This is mutual delegation of functions. Cooperative federalism. But this is only mutual. This is through consent. Sometimes it can be through force. Which is very important for you to understand for your prelims examination. But this time, this force is through Parliament. Parliament can delegate some executive functions of the center to the state even without their consent. That's through force. But can state delegate executive power to the center through force without consent? No, such a thing cannot happen. That means there is mutual delegation of functions. That means president will delegate some executive functions to the state, governor can delegate some executive functions to the center, but this is done mutually by the two executives, mutually, with their consent. But what if it is not through consent? Can it be through force? Yes. But this time it is the parliament which can delegate some executive powers of the center to the state through force, even without the consent of the state. Previously, it was done by two executives. Now it is done by parliament to a state. But can reverse happen? Can state legislature delegate some of the executive power to the center even without the consent of the center? No, such a thing cannot happen. That means even in this mutual delegation of powers, there is a strong bias in favor of center. Center is more powerful. Not just this, adjudicatory mechanism. Under Article 262 of the Constitution, Parliament has the power to adjudicate interstate river water disputes. How Parliament can adjudicate? By enacting a law. Through this law, what Parliament can do? Parliament can exclude jurisdiction of the Supreme Court as well. Who can adjudicate disputes between center and the state? Or amongst the states, who can decide, who can judicially decide which is right, who is wrong? Judiciary, Supreme Court. And when we will discuss judiciary tomorrow, we will discuss original jurisdiction, where if there is a dispute between center and the state, that can be filed only in the Supreme Court. If there is a dispute between two or more states with each other, such a dispute can be filed and decided only by the Supreme Court. But Constitution says that in some areas we should ensure cooperation between center and the state. What is this matter? Interstate river water dispute. Parliament will now adjudicate, not the judiciary, not the Supreme Court. We will exclude Supreme Court. And Parliament will adjudicate interstate river water disputes. Why? Because this is primarily a political matter. If a particular state has snatched the power of another state, violated a contract, such a dispute can be filed in the Supreme Court. That means in such violation of contracts, for example, I am a murderer, you are a victim. There is one person who is guilty, there is another person who is a victim. In a particular case, there is a victim, there is guilty. But in these water matters, nobody is guilty. Nobody is wrong. For example, on Kaveri river water dispute, can we say Karnataka is wrong? No, because Karnataka has to take the interest of its own farmers into mind. Can we say Tamil Nadu is wrong? No. It has to get water from Karnataka. Otherwise, how will water be given for irrigation purposes in Tamil Nadu. If Karnataka says, I will not give water, we will block water, we will construct dams, and we will ensure that the flow of water into Tamil Nadu is blocked or stopped. Maybe they're not wrong, because they have to take interest of their own people, farmers, into mind. Tamil Nadu also is not wrong, because then where will the water come? Monsoon is deficient. We get monsoon rain at the end because of the northeastern monsoon. Where will we get the water? So nobody is right, nobody is wrong. It's basically a political matter. It involves give and take. Something Karnataka has to give, something Tamil Nadu also will have to give up. And it is through give and take that we will resolve these interstate river water disputes. Parliament Constitution says in such cases we need cooperation. That is why we will not leave it to the judiciary, because what will judiciary do? Judiciary only has the power to decide who is guilty, who is not, who is victim, who is innocent. Parliament will resolve such interstate river water disputes. Parliament will adjudicate interstate river water disputes by passing a law. And Parliament enacted this law in 1956, known as Interstate River Water Disputes Act. And it is this act which empowers the president, that dear president, what you have to do, you establish a tribunal. And then this tribunal will give an award. And this award is binding on the states. Under Article 262, which is known as adjudicatory mechanism, Parliament can adjudicate, can resolve, can give verdict on interstate river water disputes. How? By passing a law. And through this law, it can even exclude the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, saying, stay away from this. This is a political matter. We will resolve it on our own. And the law was passed in 1956. And it is this Interstate River Water Disputes Act which empowers the president, that dear president, whenever we will get a dispute, for example, on Kaveri, we will get a dispute, we will send the matter to you, you set up a tribunal. In this tribunal, there will be members of judiciary as well. There will be members from bureaucracy as well. And together you will decide who and what is the award to be given. How many million cusecs of water Karnataka will have to give to Tamil Nadu. And that award will be final. You cannot challenge this award in the court, because it's a political matter. Here there is no right, no wrong. But there is a problem with this tribunal. Number one, it empowers the president to set up a tribunal. Listen to me carefully. It empowers the president to set up a tribunal, but president is a rubber stamp. It is when the prime minister advises the president, set up the tribunal, then the president sets up the tribunal. And sometimes setting up of tribunal is time consuming. After many decades of dispute on Kaveri, after many decades, then president set up an interstate river water dispute on Kaveri tribunal. Kaveri tribunal. So number one, the problem is that even setting this tribunal is time consuming. There is another problem. Different tribunals for different disputes. On Kaveri, there is one tribunal. On Mahanadi, there can be another tribunal. On Satluj, there can be another tribunal. On Narmada river water dispute, there can be another tribunal. Tribunals. So we are only creating tribunals. We are not deciding the matters. Why? Because the problem number third is no time limit. The dispute on Kaveri is very old. And the award given by this tribunal was in 2006. So the problem is, when Constitution says Parliament can adjudicate interstate river water disputes, even excluding the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. What Parliament has done, it has enacted a law known as Interstate River Water Disputes Act. Under this act, whenever we get a dispute on a particular river, we will advise the president, you set up a tribunal. But when would we advise the president? It's time consuming. It takes a lot of time. Problem number 2, different tribunals for different disputes. Problem number 3, there is no time period. And problem number 4, Supreme Court involves itself. Kaveri River Water Tribunal gave an award. It was challenged in the Supreme Court. Kaveri River Water Tribunal is not given an award. It is challenged before the court. The court is asked, how can you interfere? Don't you know this is a political matter where there is no wrong or right? This is the matter that we will leave it to the political class to resolve. How are you interfering and why are you interfering? Supreme Court says, number 1, we have appellate jurisdiction. We don't have original jurisdiction on river water disputes, but we have appellate jurisdiction. What is original and appellate jurisdiction? That means you cannot approach us directly to resolve this interstate river water dispute. We will not get involved in the first instance. That means wherever there is a dispute, whenever the dispute arises, you have to go to a tribunal. You cannot directly come to us. That we understand. We do not have the original jurisdiction. But when the award is given by the tribunal, what if that award is not implemented? You have to come to us and file an appeal. So we are exercising appellate jurisdiction. That means we can hear appeals against the order given by a tribunal. If that order is not implemented, you will come to us to file an appeal and we will direct Karnataka, please release this water. Second, Supreme Court says, what is an award? Award is not like a performance reward for something that you have done. Award is like the final judgment given by a tribunal. So I am awarding Karnataka, you have to give these many million cusecs of water to Tamil Nadu. That is an award. That means that's the final judgment. Second, why Supreme Court is interfering? Supreme Court says this is a matter related to water. This water is used by people for drinking purposes. This water is used by people for irrigation as well. Water is used to keep the people alive. That means right to life. Irrigation is used to ensure livelihood of the people, which means the right to livelihood. Right to livelihood is a fundamental right under Article 21. Right to life is a fundamental right under Article 21. So if somebody is approaching us saying this is not a matter related to interstate river water dispute, this is a matter related to my right to life, this is a matter related to my right to livelihood, I have to hear this matter because I am obligated to hear this matter because I am the protector of fundamental rights. That is how I am getting involved, says the Supreme Court. But what is the best way to resolve these interstate river water disputes? The best way is to change the law, amend the law. And for that, there is a bill which is pending in the parliament since 2019, which is basically the amendment to that 1956 law, Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956. That law is to be amended. For that, there is a bill pending in the parliament known as Interstate River Water Disputes Amendment Bill 2019. And what this law basically says, one common tribunal. Right now, the problem is, once the dispute comes, then the president will set up a tribunal. Setting up of this tribunal is problematic because it takes a lot of time. What if tribunal already exists? We will create a tribunal. This tribunal will exist. So whenever there is a dispute, it will come to this tribunal. That means you don't have to set up a tribunal. Tribunal will be set up. And you don't need different tribunals for different water disputes. One common tribunal to hear all interstate river water disputes. And a time limit is prescribed. Fixed, strict timelines will be prescribed. Within 2 years, you will have to resolve these interstate river water disputes. But this bill, unfortunately, has not been passed yet. It is still pending in the parliament. Once it is passed, then we will analyze this bill, whether this bill is good, bad, what are the changes that have been brought by this bill. But for our examination currently, we have to look at what is this adjudicatory mechanism, where center and states, they cooperate with each other to resolve their interstate river water disputes. Article 262 of the Constitution. But that is on river water disputes. What if there is another dispute? Dispute on any other matter other than river water dispute? For that, there is a consultative mechanism. What is that consultative mechanism? Under Article 263, the President may set up something known as Interstate Council. Disputes other than river water disputes. But there is no adjudicatory mechanism for these disputes other than river water disputes. There is only consultative mechanism. That means an interstate council will consult, will be consulted, will discuss, will debate all these disputes other than interstate river water disputes. Interstate council will be headed by Prime Minister. Union ministers are part of it. Chief ministers of all states and union territories are part of it. Administrators of union territories will be part of this. So what is this interstate council? It's like a federal body which consists of representatives from the center, representative from the states. They come together, they consult each other on all disputes other than interstate river water disputes. But even this interstate council is not doing its job properly because it does not have the mandate to adjudicate. Its mandate is only to consult each other on other disputes between center and the states. Why can't we turn this consultative mechanism also into a adjudicatory mechanism? Sir, what are you saying? There is one criticism leveled at the Supreme Court almost always on a daily basis, that you are interfering with the job of the legislature, you are interfering with the job of the executive, that you are practicing something known as judicial activism or judicial overreach. You are going beyond your powers, beyond your domain, and entering into the domain of the legislature, entering into the domain of the executive. That is the criticism leveled at the judiciary almost always. As recent as giving a right to same-sex couples to marry, the argument was same, please don't interfere. That's not your job. That's the job of the parliament. Why are you interfering? But Supreme Court is helpless but to interfere. For example, on anti-defection law, the role of the speaker is that whatever decision you take is final and binding. Even then the matter goes to the court. Court is helpless because you're not doing your job properly. Once the speaker certifies that a bill is a money bill, that certificate is final. Even then the matter goes to the court. When the session of the parliament is to be summoned, Mr. Bhagwant Mann advises the governor, please call the session of the state legislature. Governor says, no, I am hurt by your letter, I will not. Matter goes to the court, and now the court has to interfere. And then you cry, the court is interfering. It will have to interfere because you go running to the court. Please interfere, please resolve our disputes. Telangana government, sir, governor, not signing the bill, please. You go rushing to the court and then you cry that the court is interfering in our domain. These political matters involving center and states, these should be best decided, debated in interstate council. Why can't this interstate council, with Prime Minister and the ministers, all the chief ministers of states and union territories, together decide whether this governor should have a discretion or not? And if this governor should have a discretion, can we not codify that these are the only instances where the governor can use his discretion? In all other matters, this governor is bound by the aid and advice of the chief minister. So instead of only consulting, because in interstate council, they only consult, they only discuss. Nitish Kumar, as the chief minister, said this office of governor should be abolished. He said this while in an interstate council meeting. Why can't this interstate council, which is today a consultative body, becomes an adjudicatory body? It is this interstate council which should decide that, governor, you don't have discretion in these matters, you have discretion in these matters. Governor, whenever a bill is presented to you, these are the options available to you. You can't mechanically reserve any bill for the consideration of the president. That is the reform that we can propose to make this interstate council better. Instead of a consultative mechanism, it should follow an adjudicatory mechanism. It should adjudicate, resolve the disputes between center and the state on all other matters except interstate river water disputes. But then, there are some extra constitutional provisions as well, which facilitate cooperative federalism. What are these extra constitutional mechanisms? Zonal council. What are these zonal councils? States Reorganization Act was passed in the year 1956. Prior to 1956, we had Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D territory. Basis the report of the States Reorganization Commission, this Part A, B, C, D differentiation was done away with. Now we have 14 states and 6 union territories in 1956. But it was on the advice of Pandit Nehru that 5 zonal councils were also set up. Zonal councils? The problems being faced by northern states are different from the problems faced by the southern states. In southern states, life expectancy is good. Human development indicators are good. Healthcare facilities are good. Educational opportunities are better. In northern states, the problems are different. Population explosion. In northern states, for example, the Himalayan states, they don't have the problem of water. Because the glaciers melt, water flows, they don't have the problem. Precipitation, monsoon is also good. But in southern states, they are dependent on the monsoon. If monsoon fails, agriculture collapses. Eastern states, problem is different. Western states, problem is different. In western states, there are also states where we have desert areas. Gujarat, Kutch, Rajasthan, Jaisalmer. So the problems of southern states are different from northern states, different from eastern states, different from western states, different from central India. Pandit Nehru said, why can't we create zones? Zonal councils. That means we will have 5 zonal councils. We will have a northern zonal council, a southern zonal council, eastern, western, and central zonal council. And let's have the meetings of these zonal councils every year. The Home Minister will be the chairman of all these zonal councils. When chairman will be the zonal, when home minister will be the chairperson of all these zonal councils, vice chairperson would be the chief minister by rotation. What does that mean by rotation? Look at Northern Zonal Council. It comprises states such as Haryana, Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, NCT, Delhi, Union Capital Territory of Chandigarh as well. That means states as well as UTs are represented in Zonal Council. Who is the chairperson? Home Minister. Who is the deputy chairperson? By rotation. First, we will have the Chief Minister of Haryana as the deputy chairperson. In the next meeting, we will have CM of Himachal. In the next meeting, we will have the CM of Uttarakhand. In the next meeting, we will have the CM of Delhi, if he is there. Otherwise, he will go to jail. Maybe you will now see very soon Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal arrested in the liquor scam. Rightly, wrongly, we don't have to get into that, but that is something that is bound to happen. So by rotation, the Chief Minister will be the deputy chairperson. And they will discuss all the problems that are faced by their particular zone. Any such department, any such initiative where center and states, they come together to discuss their problems. What is this? We are cooperating with each other. This is cooperative federalism. Initially, there were 5 zonal councils. The year was 1972 when Northeastern Council Act was passed. A 6th zonal council was set up known as Northeastern Council. These zonal councils are basically statutory bodies. What is a statutory body? A body which is created by the law passed by the parliament. It is not mentioned in the constitution. It is basically created by the law passed by the parliament. And 5 councils were set up under the States Reorganization Act of 1956. One, which is Northeastern Council. It was set up by the Northeastern Council Act of 1972. So if the question comes, how many zonal councils were set up basis States Reorganization Act 1956? 5. The 6th one was created by Northeastern Council Act 1972. Zonal councils. Then we have something known as NITI Aayog. And the predecessor of NITI Aayog was Planning Commission. You might have read in economics or you would read in world history, there was a massive problem faced by the world in the 1920s, late 1920s, early 1930s. What was that problem? The Great Depression, where the growth was plummeting. The plummeting growth also led to unemployment. That's what we call the Great Depression. That means on one hand, we don't have growth, on negative growth. On the other hand, the jobs are also not available. Unemployment is rising. That is what we call the Great Depression. It happened in Europe. It happened in America in 1929 to 33. There was one country which was unaffected by this, and that was Russia, Soviet Union. Pandit Nehru went to Russia. He was very fascinated by Russia. In fact, most of the independent leaders who fought for India's independence, they were fascinated by Russia. Maybe fascinated by the communist revolution which happened in Russia in 1917. Whether that was good or bad, that is the domain of world history. Whether Stalin was good or not, that is the domain of the history. But the point is, Pandit Nehru identified that there is one reason why Soviet Union was unaffected by this Great Depression. Because they have planning commissions. They plan for 10 years. Pandit Nehru thought that once we will give independence, we will also have this planning commission. But instead of 10 years, we will plan for 5 years. That is how 5-year plans we would start. What is going to be the plan of our economic growth and development for the next 5 years? inclusive development, more inclusive development, more and more inclusive development, whatever the plan is. And then you would plan out, chart out policies and programs which will help you achieve that goal. Planning Commission was headed by Prime Minister. He was assisted by Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission, who used to be a bureaucrat. For example, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, noted economist, he was the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission. But this Planning Commission was criticized heavily. Why? One particular gentleman from Gujarat, who was then the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he said, if I come to power, I will abolish Planning Commission. Why? Because this Planning Commission is against federal spirit. I am an elected Chief Minister. I have to now approach this Planning Commission, which is extra constitutional, non-statutory body. Constitutional bodies are those which are created by the Constitution. Statutory bodies are those which are created by the law passed by the Parliament. Then we have extra constitutional, non-statutory bodies. That means these bodies, such as Planning Commission, they are created by a government resolution. Not created by parliamentary law, not created by the Constitution. Government issues a notification, this body is created. And through a government notification, Planning Commission was created. Mr. Modi said, I am a constitutional position holder. I am the Chief Minister of a state. And I have to go with a begging bowl before a body which is not even mentioned in the Constitution, which is not even a body passed by the Parliament. It's a government resolution body. And I have to beg them for funds. Please give me funds for my various schemes. And I have to go to Delhi, where Planning Commission sits. This is like an insult to chief ministers, to states, where for their money, they have to go to a body which is not created by the Constitution. And they decide what and how we will develop. This one size fits all, this strategy won't work. Planning Commission sitting in Delhi deciding how should development take place in the entire country. And they will allocate money to various states. And all these chief ministers will have to come to Delhi with a begging bowl, please give us money. This Planning Commission was dissolved, abolished when Mr. Modi came to power in 2014. And it was replaced by NITI Aayog. The job of this Planning Commission was to approve these, create these 5-year plans. So 5-year plans of the entire country was created by a body which is not there in the Constitution, which is not there created by any law, which is not even represented by states. There was no representative from the state in the Planning Commission, created by the center, and center decides everything. This Planning Commission was abolished. It was replaced by another extra constitutional, non-statutory body known as NITI Aayog. And NITI Aayog is a classic example of cooperative federalism. Why? Because NITI Aayog will have Prime Minister and its chairperson, will have chief ministers of all states, lieutenant governors of all union territories. So when state center is represented in this body is an example of cooperative federalism. This NITI Aayog is like the think tank. It will advise the center as well as states that these are the policies that you should create. Advise them. Planning Commission was not advising. Planning Commission was ordering. Now NITI Aayog will advise. Now it's for the center and the state to either accept or reject that advice. But it will advise. How to allocate money to various schemes that you have. NITI Aayog will advise, not direct. Planning Commission was directing. So NITI Aayog is also an example of cooperative federalism, center and state coming together for the larger national project. Similarly, we had National Integration Council, which used to be, because the last meeting of this National Integration Council happened in September 2013. Now people are demanding we should reconvene this National Integration Council. National Integration Council had Prime Minister at its head. All union ministers were part of it. All chief ministers were also part of it. Journalists, activists, authors, all of them would come together to debate questions affecting our national integration. What is the threat to our national integration? Communalism is a threat. Regionalism is a threat. Terrorism is a threat. All these threats to national integration will be debated, discussed in this National Integration Council. And look at the composition of this body. All chief ministers, all union ministers, prime minister at the head, and on the invite of the prime minister, top journalists, top advisors, activists, businessmen, they will participate in this meeting. And ultimately will advise the government what steps you should take to ensure national integration. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act was passed on the recommendations of National Integration Council. How do we prevent these unlawful activities which affect our national integration? For that, there needs to be a law. This law was passed by the Parliament on the recommendations of National Integration Council. ULFA was banned, which was a terrorist organization from Assam. It was banned because it was a threat to national integration on the advice of National Integration Council. But there are experts who now say that there is more danger to our national integration today because of the rising communal conflicts, because of tribal conflicts, which is also affecting our national integration. So it is time to reconvene National Integration Council, which last met in September 2013 when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister. After that, it did not meet. It was not convened. So it is time to reconvene National Integration Council. But whatever we discussed as of now was mostly facts, lots and lots of facts, which can be relevant for the prelims. We also discussed if such a question is asked, are we a centralized federalism or not? For that, the arguments we have presented. But now let's look at this federalism as a concept in great detail. Federalism as a term is derived from Latin word fidus, which means treaty or an agreement. What is federalism basically? It refers to constitutionally allocated. That means constitution should allocate, should distribute powers between two or more levels of government. Federalism term is derived from the Latin word fidus, which means a treaty or an agreement. For example, those states which were under the British Empire, those states in Northern America, which were under the control of the British Empire, they decided to revolt, seek their independence. That is what we call American War of Independence. Now these states which came out of British colonialism, now they are independent sovereign countries. Now these sovereign countries decided to come together to create United States of America. Through what? Through a treaty, through an agreement. United States is a federal structure. They created a constitution. They adopted this constitution at Philadelphia. They enacted this constitution in 1789. So the same constitution of United States has now distributed powers between center and the states. Why? Because United States was created because of a treaty, because of an agreement. When these sovereign states decided to come together through a treaty, through an agreement to create United States of America. And then the powers are distributed. Powers are distributed to the center, powers are distributed to the states, powers can be distributed to local governments as well. And the classic example of federal states are United States, Australia, Switzerland. But there are different models of federalism. One such model is Indian federalism. What is Indian model of federalism? When a geographically vast and culturally diverse state gives autonomy to its provinces for administrative convenience, for representing regional interests. Such a type of federalism is what we call holding together federalism. For example, in United States, in Australia, in Switzerland, what is their federalism? Their federalism is that states have decided to come together through an agreement to create a political entity known as United States of America. That is federalism for them. That means this entity was created because there was a treaty, because there was an agreement. And because there was an agreement, powers were distributed. Some given to the center, some given to the states. But India is not that federalism. We say Indian example of federalism is that we are holding together federalism. And what is this federalism? Where center has some powers, states have some powers. Why powers are distributed between center and the state? Number one, for administrative convenience. It's a geographically very vast country such as India. Center cannot govern the entire country effectively. Can center ensure law and order of the entire country? No. Educational opportunities, local interests of all the people, it would be very difficult to manage. That is why in our first few classes we discussed that there should be more and more states in India. Small is beautiful. Smaller the state, equitable the development. If the entire country was only controlled by the center, we would have seen those areas, some areas would have been more developed, majority of the country would have been lesser developed. Because you can't ensure equitable development because you don't have time. You can't allocate time to all the regions of the country. So for administrative convenience, let Tamil Nadu deal with its own area. Let Maharashtra deal with its own area. Let Punjab deal with its own area. That is why powers were distributed. So to ensure administrative convenience, we did this experiment with federalism. And not just for that, for representing regional interests. Basically, to hold the country together. In 1947, the country was partitioned on the grounds of religion. If we would not have created states in the name of language, we would have witnessed another partition because language was not respected. Kannadigas have different aspirations. Tamilians have different aspirations. Teluguites have different expectations and aspirations. Bengalis have different. Punjabis have different. The Jats have different. We made them into states so that they also feel secure within India, so that the country is not further divided, so that we are held together. So autonomy was given to states. You decide on law and order. You decide on police. You decide on agriculture. You decide on your local aspirations. You decide, we will not interfere. So this power was distributed by constitution, some to the center, There are some constitutions which give autonomy to the states, distribute the power between center and the state, not for administrative convenience, but for their very survival. India may not have been united if the states were not created in the name of language, if language was not respected, if regional interest and aspirations were not satisfied. But even in that, Pandit Nehru said in the Constituent Assembly that we cannot give more powers to the states. And you need to understand where is that line of thinking coming from. Members in the Constituent Assembly agreed. We cannot make states more powerful. Despite giving them powers, functions, roles, responsibilities, we have to have a bias towards center, unitary bias to our federal polity, because we have to hold center more powerful. Because if center is not more powerful, then we cannot ensure peace. If the center is not more powerful, then we cannot coordinate vital interests. If the center is not powerful, then we cannot speak for the whole country as one. For example, on Israel-Hamas dispute, war, what is our position? If this power was not given to the center that you decide foreign policy, Telangana would have said, we support Palestine, we support Hamas. West Bengal would have said, we support Israel. Uttar Pradesh would have said, we support nobody, we will go there and take over both the countries. We could not have spoken as one country on behalf of the entire country if this power was not concentrated with center. We would not have been able to coordinate vital interests. For example, we have an atomic bomb. We have a missile, BrahMos, which is a joint collaboration between Russia and India. BrahMos' name is derived from two rivers. Can you tell me the names of those two rivers? From India, Brahmaputra. From Russia, Moksva. So it's basically a portmanteau. It's a mix of two words, BrahMos. If this power was not given to center, Uttar Pradesh would have said, give us this missile, we will throw it to Pakistan. Tamil Nadu would have said, give us this missile, we will throw it at Sri Lanka, we will liberate the Sri Lankan Tamils. Not just this, there is earthquake, there is hurricane, there is a tsunami. We need a central government so that it can coordinate all the developmental and rescue efforts. That is why Pandit Nehru said, we will believe in federalism, but don't make a mistake of giving more powers to the states as against the center. Center has to become more powerful. We will give responsibility to the states, but lesser responsibility. More responsibility will be that of center. And that is how we reach to centralized federalism, for which Australian constitutional expert K.C. Ware says, we are quasi-federal. A mix of unitary features, a mix of federal features. What are those features which make Indian constitution or Indian federalism, centralized federalism? Article 3. Parliament has the power to reorganize the state. Parliament can divide a state, merge two or more states, convert a state into a union territory. That is not the power available with the center in US. So Article 3 says we are biased in favor of a strong center, centralized federalism. There are more subjects in union list than in state list. 97 items in union list, 61 items in state list. And do you know, there used to be 66 items in state list. 5 items were snatched from state list, were made part of concurrent list. Residuary powers are with the center, not the state. And I don't have to even explain what the governor can do. Appointed by the center, but to a state. Article 356, President's rule. Center can dismiss a state. We have single constitution for the entire country. Unlike United States, where they have dual constitution, two constitutions, one for the center, one for the states. One common single constitution, single citizenship as well. Election Commission of India organizes election not only to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha but to the state assemblies as well. Who appoints CEC president? Who can remove CEC president? Who appoints election commissioner president? Who can remove election commissioner president? Who is president? Said head of the center. Audit machinery, CAG, which we will discuss in governance, accountability. CAG audits the account not only of the center but of the states as well. States are spending the money, but audit is done by the center, central institution, CAG, Comptroller and the Auditor General of India. All these items put together gives us a sense that we are a centralized federalism, where our constitution is biased in favor of a strong center. And not just that, we have common integrated judiciary. High court judge can be transferred from one high court to another high court, appointed by the president, can be removed based on the resolution of the parliament. That means center alone is responsible. All India service officers, appointed by the center, removed by the center, controlled by the center, disciplined by the center. But where are they working? In the states. All these are examples that our constitution is biased in favor of a strong center. But this term federalism is not mentioned anywhere in the constitution. Article 1, Clause 1, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Federalism is not mentioned. Federal term is not mentioned anywhere in the constitution. Yet this federalism is part of the basic structure of the constitution. That is why some people say it was not through design that federalism emerged in India, or federalism was set up in India, or federalism was created in India. Federalism has emerged in India through various accidents. For that, we have to travel through the history, a little bit of history, and to understand how federalism evolved and became part of the basic structure of the constitution. For that, we have to divide our independent history into 4 stages. To come to this conclusion, how exactly federalism emerged in India, how we became federal, although constitution thought we are something else, because they gave more powers to the center. For that, we need to understand the first phase is between 1952 to 1967. This is what we call one-party federalism. There was only one political party which dominated the country in this entire period, and that was Indian National Congress. But it was not the Congress of today. It was the Congress of the past. Congress was in power at the center. Congress was in power in most of the states as well. We can say in almost all the states as well. With few exceptions, we will discuss. At the center, we had Pandit Nehru. In the states, we had Congress stalwarts. Today, if BJP has to take any decision, even in a state, whether Bulldozer Mama will continue to be the chief minister or not, that central BJP, Mr. Modi, Mr. Amit Shah, possibly Mr. Jay Prakash Nadda will also decide. Some say even Jaiprakash Nadda is the president because Mr. Modi wants him to be the president so that he can listen to Mr. Modi. So basically, two people in BJP decide everything that BJP has to do, Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah. In Uttarakhand, we had three chief ministers. Chief minister appointed by BJP, then removed. Another chief minister appointed, he was not also doing well, removed. So center decides. Anandiben Patel, you are the chief minister of Gujarat. Resign. Go to UP as the governor. Here we will appoint someone else as the chief minister. That someone else is also not, Mr. Rupani is not doing well. Mr. Rupani, please resign. Central BJP decides. So this is something that we call high command culture. And BJP used to laugh at Congress. Because when Congress would win an election in the state leaders were asked who will become the chief minister. They would say high command will decide. That means the Gandhi family will decide in Delhi. BJP would laugh at the Congress. Are you a democratic political party where you cannot decide who should be the chief minister? MLAs should get to decide who is the chief minister. various communist policies catering to the interests of the poor or to the marginalized people or to the workers. ED, NIA, targeting opposition leaders. Sometimes through Pegasus. Pegasus is a software manufactured by, created by an Israeli firm, and they have a policy that they sell this software only to governments. It was alleged that Pegasus was used in India. If it was used in India, who would have employed Pegasus? Government. Why? Because the company which sells Pegasus sells only to the government. And Pegasus was used to target opposition leaders. What is Pegasus? Basically, normally what happens, I have a phone. You will send me a link. I will click on this link. I should not have. You have hacked into my phone. When you have hacked into my phone, now you can operate my phone from a remote location. Hacking. Pegasus is a sophisticated software where it gets installed in your phone. Your phone is surveilled even without you knowing it. You don't have to click on anything. Because of various vulnerabilities, Pegasus is installed and now your phone is being tracked. Not only phone being tracked, you can plant evidence also. For example, my laptop. What if in this laptop there is a document which talks about waging war against India, which talks about the designs of various missiles? That means it's sharing of sensitive information. If this laptop is confiscated from me, it can be presented as an evidence. Court can punish me because I'm waging war against the country because the evidence is in my laptop. There was one individual, Rona Wilson. Okay, let's not get into that. That is irrelevant for the exam now. Just to give you a broad picture, there has been allegation of misuse of central agencies such as CBI, such as NIA, such as Enforcement Directorate against the opposition leaders. Dismissal of governments in Arunachal and Uttarakhand, 2016. Although it was overturned by the courts, but there was a misuse of Article 356. Not just this, anti-defection law subverted, whether it is Maharashtra, whether it is Karnataka, whether it is Madhya Pradesh. So we are going back to an old stage of federalism where there is one party which is dominated at the center. And there was a time when BJP was in power in 21 states as well. But then thanks to something, now BJP is a dominant force at center. But it is the Congress and opposition which are in power in the states, majority of the states. Congress in Rajasthan, Congress in Chhattisgarh, Congress in Himachal Pradesh, opposition political parties, whether it is Telangana, in the entire South India. That is leading to a situation where federalism is still intact, where the states are still resisting the central party to control the political nature of India. This central party tomorrow can be Congress again, can be Aam Aadmi Party later, can be my party later. But we have to ensure that interests of the states are protected in India so that one party at the center or the central government cannot dominate the states. This is through series of accidents that federalism has emerged in India. That is why some people, for example, Kapil Sibal, he says India is not federalism because it was meant to be federalism under the constitution. Federalism has emerged in India through various accidents. Accident of rise of regional political parties, establishment of states in the name of language. If Mr. Poti Sriramulu would not have died, if we would not have accepted Andhra to be created on linguistic lines, maybe we would not have reorganized the entire country on the basis of various languages. Judicial safeguards because of S.R. Bommai judgment, 73rd, 74th Amendment, LPG reforms of 1991, Sarkaria Commission. More financial resources are given to the states under Finance Commission. All these accidents have led to the emergence of federalism in India. That is what completes our topic today. We'll meet tomorrow, and tomorrow we will start with local government.